In February of 2022, Hasbro CEO Chris Cox, best known for overseeing the firing of over 1,000 employees shortly before Christmas Day, announced that due to the incredible success of the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth Magic the Gathering set, Wizards of the Coast would be releasing 2 similarly sized Universes Beyond products in 2025. Quoted by Chase Carter in Dicebreaker magazine, he said to investors, "We think we'll have a similar uplift as we did for Lord of the Rings, and that's underlying a lot of our bullishness on the growth of Magic." I don't know what Chris Cox actually sounds like, but I also don't actually care. It is unclear as to whether or not these prospective products will be replacing in-universe Magic expansions, but 2 in 1 year would certainly crowd an already fit to bursting release schedule unless something got cut and pushed back. Tales of Middle-earth was a watershed moment for Magic the Gathering, being the second modern legal set to be produced in draftable booster packs which exclusively and explicitly explores a non-Magic IP, and the first IP originating outside of Wizards of the Coast themselves. It was ludicrously successful to boot, being the second best-selling Magic the Gathering set of all time, as reported by Matt Bassel at Wargamer, beaten out only by Modern Horizons 2. Previous to this, Universes Beyond had been constrained, if you can call it that, to constructed products like Commander decks and special secret lair releases, themselves a relatively recent addition in Magic's 30-year history, depicting recognisable characters from shows like Doctor Who, cartoons like Transformers, and video games like Fortnite. This last example being deliciously appropriate. Arguably, Fortnite's most prominent feature is its staggeringly large and ever-growing roster of IP tie-ins, from characters like Thanos to human performers like The Weeknd to concepts like the Kamehameha. No commodifiable notion or recognisable likeness is safe from this vortex of culture. If there is an image, logo, or story that prompts positive recognition in the minds of 8 to 38-year-olds, Epic Games has already sent its owner an email begging to cut a check for a licensed skin. And Hasbro is not far behind. Tap Terra's Golden Throne to cast the ever-humble Autobot Ultra Magnus. Give him haste with Gimli's reckless might, and put Mr. House, President and CEO, into play when he attacks. With Assassin's Creed, Final Fantasy, Marvel, and more as yet unrevealed shallow depths to plumb, who's to say what part of Magic's waning originality will be skipped over and ignored to make room for Tales from Arkham Asylum, or Magic the Gathering, a Star Wars story. Before Fortnite and Magic, all that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned, and man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. The need of a constantly expanding market for its products chases the bourgeoisie over the entire surface of the globe. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. So is this a good or a bad thing? You know, no, I preferred Spice 8 Rack's earlier work as well. Yeah, its new stuff is kind of derivative. Oh, hello spicy people of the internet. I'm Spice 8 Rack, aka Ignigo Montoya if the wokes got to him, and welcome back to the channel. The dialectic teaches us that all things exist in a state of growth or decay, that the old is dying and the new is struggling to be born. So when we look at Wizards and Hasbro's increasingly unsustainable growth targets, mass layoffs, and slashed language and region support for the global south, it's easy to view this as having a causal relationship with the direction the game itself has gone in. Magic dying in a financial sense becomes conflated with people's personal grievances with Magic's diluted identity. A picture of a collectible Ezio Auditore da Firenze with the caption "Magic is dead" is synonymous with the same caption above a picture of Hasbro's languishing stock price, or even a screenshot of a wiki page updated to confirm the homosexuality of a background character. The rarely proven idiom of go woke, go broke trotted out here by those who have decided to make their messy divorce everybody else's problem. Even if such declarations that magic is dead occur every time a product bombs or a game system is reworked without the company collapsing or the game actually dying, for many people the death of magic has already happened in a more abstract capacity. Of course, the dialectic also teaches us that there are no fixed states of things. The death of a game, certainly an analog one like Magic, is hardly ever a definite thing. Even if WotC closed its doors forever tomorrow, Magic wouldn't be dead. Netrunner, another card game designed by Richard Garfield, has been out of production since WotC failed to renew Fantasy Flight Games' license to produce it back in 2018. But since then, a community-oriented non-profit, Null Signal Games, has unofficially produced expansions, run tournaments, maintains ban lists, and generally keeps the game ticking along. Having spoken to some people who still play it, ticking along better now than ever before. Netrunner is dead. Long live Netrunner. In that vein, how many Commander evenings do you attend that have no WotC sanctioning? Would you simply never pick your cards up again if you knew no more were being officially made? If a ball rolls to you in the park, do you feel a desire to boot it back to the group who lost it, even though there's no intrinsic motive beyond play guiding you to do so? Well, do you? You debauched communist gay? Of course, the death of the companies that produce Magic is as inevitable as the setting of the sun. Decay is inexorable, even if it really doesn't need to be hastened quite as fast as it arguably is right now. But that's not what interests me. I want to talk about something more ephemeral. What the state of the game says about the systems under which it is produced.
It's a handful, but nothing worth doing is easy.
But before we get too high and mighty, let us not pretend we are made of stone. We each have childhood joys, memories of media from our youth, and foundational texts that changed how we came to understand the world around us. It would be a delight and a treat for Magic, this game that we all love to play in one way or another, to be a medium to explore those artifacts again and to introduce them to new people. Never do I have a conversation about universes beyond with players, no matter how much they hate the concept, where they don't volunteer the exception to their distaste.
Universes Beyond is the death of Magic the Gathering,
They say, shortly followed by,
but if they made a Master Chief secret lair, I'm all in, baby. Wild horses couldn't hold me back.
So, to lay my cards on the table, if you'll pardon the pun, and you will, this is my channel, you will do what I say. Here is the list of the universes beyond that, no matter what I'm about to say in the rest of this video, I could not help but be excited to see in print. Doctor Who was already a big one. Tennant and Tate gave formative performances, but Eccleston has grown to be my favourite Doctor as time goes on. His episodes are still phenomenal, and I've even gone as far as to make a fun extra upkeeps commander deck based on him. For the rest, they are mainly articles of British media, you know, back when our cultural exports varied beyond Harry Potter remake slop and game shows poorly masquerading as social experiments. Ooh, will a series of perfect strangers lie to each other for a life-changing amount of money? Yeah, of course they will, Claudia. Olive oil costs £13 a litre at Big Tesco. It's either betrayal or revolution. Which way, Western man? Personally, I would be unashamedly excited to see the following. Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy would be a treat, ideally in a revitalised silver border. I would literally never stop drafting a standard legal set exploring Discworld. Taking a slight non-UK tangent, 4 Soulsborne commander decks based on Boletaria, Lordran, Drangleic, and Yharnam would allow me to stall EDH pods by recycling H-Bomber Guy's correct opinions about DS2 being the best game in the series. Returning to this awful country, I would positively perish to see British children's TV characters put to cardstock. The Clangers, Dick and Dom in Da Bungalow, Mr. Ben, Bagpuss, Mr. Blobby, Thomas the Tank Engine, etc. The Sandman books would also be a great source of... What was that? You don't know Mr. Blobby? Oh, ye unsullied youth! Ye unsuspecting student! Gather thyself, and prepare to sup the nectar of education. Okay, we've front-loaded the video with enough silliness. Now it's time to talk about capitalism.
You're a smart one. I know you'll be okay come rain or shine.
There is, or at least was, a knee-jerk reaction and dislike of Universes Beyond. On the one hand, few people celebrated the idea of mechanically unique cards getting printed in limited quantities and with jarring artwork. It varies from subject matter to subject matter and lessens the more this becomes normalised as what Magic is now, but still a majority of the player base seems unhappy with constant real-world likenesses presented in the Magic frame, especially when there is pressure to remain current. If my Humans deck is the talk of the LGS, is the thing to beat whenever Commander Night rolls around, I'd be pretty annoyed if I now felt obliged to slot a $50 reference to a TV show that ended a decade ago into it in order to remain on top of my reputation. Sorry, what was that? The Walking Dead ran until 2022? I guess they had to stop shooting when their main zombie actor died. Magic had a consistent reality, or rather hyper-reality, that many feel has been shredded by the sudden inclusion of quote-unquote real-world characters. Even if this isn't actually the first time such an event has happened. Images like Albert Einstein appearing on a Legends card, the seldom reprinted Portal 3 Kingdoms cards, which explored the historic legends of the Three Kingdoms era of Chinese history, and the occasional celebrity lookalike, were either lampooned as missteps, enjoyed as happy accidents, or acknowledged as experiments not to be repeated. They were never considered particularly impactful. Easy to dismiss by those who wish to, fun to cherish for everybody else. One fascinating way that Magic unabrasively, yet unambiguously consolidated elements from the real world into the game is through depictions of players and other community members in card art. Beginning in 1996, the year I was born by the way, player invitational cards were designed to commemorate the winners of the annual Magic Invitational Tournament, a competition between a curated roster of pro players. It took some time for each card to go from design to print, with the first ever invitational card taking 5 years to release, but eventually the likenesses of the winners of these tournaments would be officially introduced into the game. Sylvan Safekeeper, Snapcaster Mage, and the deeply apt Solemn Simulacrum were unmarked commemorations of some of Magic's best players. This program saw a decades-long hiatus after 2007, but returned in 2019 to celebrate the winners of Magic's World Championships, complete with commemorative flavor text demarcated from the rest of the card through a faint horizontal line. In the reception to these cards, we see the inverse of the disdain aimed towards Universes Beyond products. They are fondly remembered, and I recall the news that they would be returning was met with jubilation. They were also viewed as being particularly prestigious accomplishments where that pedigree ought to be reflected in their power in-game. Much maligning was made when, for example, Terry So's player invitational card Rakdos Augurmage lacked the impact of the cards that came before and after it, sandwiched as it was between Bob Mayer on Dark Confidant and Antoine Ruel in Ranger of Eos. Players, it seemed, wanted their admired professionals to have their likenesses printed on cards that would, themselves, go on to win tournaments. Even more interesting, when these cards began to see reprints with updated and in-universe artwork, there was player contention as to if this was appropriate. In online forums at the time, Dark Confidant, colloquially referred to as Bob in reference to the player whose card it was announced to be reprinted in the first Modern Masters set with new artwork. Some players called the move a slap in the face. People still wishing they used Bob Mayer's likeness in a new piece of art for the card, and others hoping that people wouldn't call the new art confidant Bob. There's a preciousness to it, an empathy extended by fans who would cherish the cards that they were printed on if only they were so lucky to be acknowledged and immortalised by Wizards of the Coast. There are other ways in which texts outside of Magic have been incorporated into the game without friction. References to famous artwork like American Gothic, photographs like lunch atop a skyscraper, real-world holidays like All Hallows Eve, and video games like Plants vs. Zombies have all made their way into the game either in artistic or mechanical reference. M15 went even further, producing an experimental series of cards designed by popular figures within contemporary gaming culture. Edmund Macmillan, one of the key designers behind games like The Binding of Isaac, helped to create the card Cruel Sadist, a similarly troubled and violent child. The creators of Penny Arcade helped to produce Avarice Amulet, an artifact which continually changes hands when the creature it's equipped to dies, a reference to a Pac-Man watch that the characters of that story covet, steal, and harm each other over. And Marcus Pearson, creator of Minecraft, helped to create Aggressive Mining, whose art and mechanics encourage the destruction of notably cubic land. A not-so-subtle reference to how Pearson destroyed his reputation by continuing to dig into new depths of conspiratorial transphobia and racism. There was even a card designed by the quote-unquote Magic community, where rules text submissions were put to public vote, eventually creating one of the most interesting discard combo pieces of all time. This card is also the only time that Magic has been referenced on cardstock outside of unofficial Magic productions and Silver Border parody sets. But all of these examples beg the question, why did these forms of reality bleeding into Magic fail to produce the kind of uproar and continued displeasure that Universes Beyond products do, where sometimes their removal from the game is actually the cause of discontent? Well, it's because all of these either fail to challenge the hyperreality of Magic or have already been captured by it. Hyperreality, a term coined by postmodern philosopher Jean Baudrillard. For the record, I do realise that's not how it's said, but I did spend my entire Mill versus Discard video citing Michael Foucault, so I'm just going to lean into it, and from here on out, I'm going to get the names of specifically French philosophers purposefully wrong. Hyperreality refers to a situation where signs of the real have substituted the real in our world. As an example, American Gothic, pastiched twice in artwork throughout Magic's history, became such a touchstone for contemporary American culture that its recognizability, its value as a sign, has triumphed over its value as a piece of art. The orcs and zombies assuming the stances of Grant Wood's Iowan farmers do not jar with our understanding of Magic's game world because American Gothic has become a floating signifier, standing for nothing and infinitely interpretable, seamless to co-opt into any reality or fiction, becoming hyper-real. Its twice simulated replication in Worlds Beyond Earth as easy to accept as the overalls worn and pitchforks wielded by the subjects of these pieces, as normal and expected as the existence of fire and men who ruin everything. Player, creator, and commentator likenesses can also be included in this analysis. Just as with how reality television produces discourses around exaggerated social tensions, the careers and likenesses of famous Magic players, designers, and commentators are one in the same with the game world of Magic. Bob is so called because Dark Confidant has Bob Mayer on it. It is his card. It is him. Magic's world is presented as imaginary in order to make us believe that the rest, the community which surrounds it, is real. But this is no longer, if it ever has been, the case. These cards, in part, betray that. The real world which surrounds Magic, gameplay performances, video essays, professional tournaments, in-jokes, drama, etc., are all still part of the simulation. Not simulation in the sense that this is all orchestrated and designed by some malevolent higher power, you understand? We're talking about postmodernism here, not Andrew Tate bollocks. Simulation in the sense that this community is as much a part of the narrative of this game as the game is itself, driven by new consumption of new simulacra, replications and replacements of reality. This is an uncomfortable thing to consider. Just how much of our enjoyment of this game, our pleasure in general, is entrenched in hyperreality, a subject for bourgeois colonization. How real jokes around plastic LGS tables about forgotten curiosities of Magic's past transfer to forums to be picked up by designers to be turned into new commodities for purchase, simulacra of that original moment of connection. How much joy is lost as a result of being officially sanctioned and marketized. How much of this game, its mechanics, story, and events are brought to life through focus groups, model simulations, and market research as opposed to passionate spontaneity. How much of a source of joy for thousands of us is organized by the same principles that gave us the Gatewatch Hot Pockets. I myself am part of this hyperreality. I am called by my online name in person, talked to about my videos, thanked by some for using my voice for certain issues, verbally abused and sometimes threatened with violence by others for those same issues. Fan art has been produced of me in Magic canon. I am sponsored by a company which distributes Magic the Gathering product. I am a connecting pipe in this sewer of commerce. And if you'd like to bling out your Commander deck with all the hottest new IP tie-ins, then boy howdy do I have a deal for you. CoolStuffInc.com has got all of your single, sealed, and ancillary needs covered, be it for Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, the One Piece card game, and many, many more. Use my code SPICE at the checkout to knock a juicy 5% off any purchase you make with them. Why not pick up some Fallout cards whilst you're there? Experience a veritable tesseract of layered sign values with a Ravages of War, a collectible card wherein a parody of 1950s Cold War info cartoons pastiches the closing scene of Planet of the Apes, the simulacra of his simulacra broken and rusting on the shoreline, a reference couched in a simulation, itself a reference to a simulacra of feigned American egalitarianism. And you can get yours in foil now for only $27.99 and 5% off that order with code SPICE. This is not a bit, this is a real brand integration with CoolStuffInc.com. You maniacs, you blew it up. Damn you! Damn you all to hell! When additions to this game challenge the bounds of Magic's hyperreality, there is an extreme reaction. Either negative, bemoaning the death of the game, or strange gallows euphoria, laughing as the shark jumps get ever more ridiculous. I remember sitting in my old office, a 4-foot wide cupboard my at-the-time landlord had laughably passed off as a third bedroom, and giggling with glee when the Magic X Fortnite secret lair was announced. Guffawing as I would if I were watching a death scene in a movie whose shot composition and choreography rendered it unintentionally hilarious. Some narratives fit into this game with ease. Lord of the Rings is still high fantasy, and its halflings, elves, and orcs do not break our immersion in this multiverse, even if the universes beyond frame and holofoil do. Adventures in the Forgotten Realms too slots neatly into Magic's hyperreality, although Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine's undeniable likenesses fray the edges of acceptability. The Walking Dead, Stranger Things, Assassin's Creed, and the upcoming Marvel collaborations, however, all set more or less on Earth, shatter that lie, as if the fences around Disneyland fell to reveal the cold car parks beyond. There's a definite sense of being late to the party as well, of products out of time, produced long after their licensing rights were hot deals and unable to envision future media connections. Assassin's Creed as a franchise saw its critical heyday come and go in the 2010s. Its games are now busywork simulators, akin to Ghost of Tsushima, Far Cry, and other white-bread Ubisoft-esque sludge buckets designed to hold attention, not challenge it. Seeing Magic the Gathering hype up an Altair card in the year of our Lord 2024 feels like watching an award ceremony hosted by an actor you could have sworn died years ago. The Walking Dead Fallout, Tomb Raider, Transformers, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, Godzilla, Jurassic Park, artifacts that remain beloved largely in spite of their most recent contributions to the cultural landscape, not because of them. There is certainly nostalgic joy derived from seeing Davros, Yes Man, and Ian Malcolm, but there's no sense of the future here. Magic isn't asking us to watch the rise of a new star, rather just to remember ones that used to shine brighter. Indeed, the only two IPs that Magic has tied in that seem to be on the rise in a meaningful way are Warhammer 40k and Baldur's Gate. The former plainly having one of the most competent marketing teams working in game worlds today, mostly, and the latter being directly connected with Wizards of the Coast already, allowing for sneak previews into, at the time, unreleased material.
The land is more than just dirt. If you look after it, it will feed you forever.
But, in what is potentially the biggest hear me out moment of my career, I think that Universes Beyond actually contains some amazing elements. I'm not just saying it produces a lot of money, that's undeniable, but also isn't the point. Not all things that are profitable are good. Landlordism, Starbucks coffee, the Modern Warfare series, etc. And not all good things are, or even should be, profitable. Healthcare, most art throughout history, and my habit of sleeping with the parents of everybody who leaves rude comments under my videos. Oh, and thanks again for the great night, Madeline. Tell your son to stop being a transphobe and I'll call you back. But even putting money aside, Universes Beyond does good for the game, both from a player base angle and also a design perspective. To begin with the former, one of the biggest social positives that arises from Universes Beyond is that it brings people into the game who otherwise wouldn't have thought twice about it. I'm beginning to lose track of how many people in my life who I've only managed to talk to about Magic because their favourite show is part of it now. I've spent many an hour showing people their favourite Doctor Who companion on my phone, explaining what their rules mean and watching them light up with intrigue and questions about both that specific product but also the game as a whole. I have a friend who plays at my LGS who is there because she loved the art of Galadriel, and call me an anarcho-tanko-pinko-hearted shitlib, but I love my friends, and getting to play a game that I love with them is thrilling and good. It also serves a reverse function as well. I'm the kind of awful societal parasite that has recognised and consumed most of the outside IPs that have been part of Universes Beyond. But I enjoyed exploring the snippets of text lifted from Tolkien's original work, which I have never read, that made their way onto the Lord of the Rings cards. And I know many other people whose first experience with Warhammer 40,000 was through these commander decks. Admittedly, it was also very funny when Magic players looked at Severina Rain and were shocked by her plainly fascistic attire. It is a truly curious feeling watching someone visibly recoil as you explain that behind these fun miniatures, which I like to roll dice to move, there lies the Imperium of Man's arcane and xenophobic eugenics. But it also gives me a great opportunity to talk with them about the amazing creative writing of that world, and namely the orcs. How all of their technology runs off of the power of manifestation. And no, not magic manifestation, the secret manifestation. Their physics-defying vehicles and weaponry solely functions because they believe that they will. How originally they were based off of British football hooligans, and how it's a popular myth that their leader's name, Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka, is based on Margaret Thatcher. Andy Chambers, one of 40k's original authors and games designers, has since revealed that the similarity is just a happy accident that grew out of live role-playing. To quote, "No Maggie here. We were doing our best to forget about the Wicked Witch," thus satisfying the hearts and minds of both trivia pedants and leftists the world over. Also, no, I will never make a video about 40k. It is one of the few joys in my life I have yet to monetize, and when I die, there will be a sliver of my soul unsullied in the name of commodification. Universes Beyond is also a fascinating treasure trove for ludonarrative analysis. Magic's story is multifaceted, convoluted, and only selectively good. As I talked about in my short little Tarkir video, Ugin and Bolas's mirroring of each other in their Planeswalker mechanics was an appropriate and satisfying gameplay decision because of their significance and relation to each other in the story of the game. If you don't pay attention to the story, however, these subtleties will be lost, and Magic's story has of late held an unfortunate reputation of not being worth your attention. This is being rectified, slowly and often in spite of the narrative direction itself, but until confidence is properly restored in the story, most people will only know about key details if they're conveyed on a cardboard game piece. Like how Niv Mizzet is planning on turning Ravnica into a new multiversal hub through manipulating omen paths. Honestly, how many of you watching knew that? Conversely, because most of the texts WotC is plumbing for Universes Beyond are mainstream, at least in dork circles, the characters and stories are recognisable, if not known, beat for beat. As a result, it's easier to appreciate ludonarrative cohesion, or at least a translation of gameplay mechanics from one medium to the other. As a 40k fan, it's fascinating seeing how Lucius the Eternal's iconic Armour of Shrieking Souls, a chaos artifact that dooms whoever slays Lucius in battle to slowly transform into him, is translated onto his card, which makes a creature bring him back when it dies. Or how, of course, the Sisters of Battle cards would be printed with the Miracle mechanic to reflect their own Miracle dice in-game. Or how Trazyn the Infinite's Necrotic Ooze-esque ability mirrors the command he holds over his unending galleries of suspended artifacts and aliens. His Death Touch ability representing how even the largest Titan can be put into the graveyard by him, i.e. added to his collection, fills me with glee. Jesus, The Infinite and the Divine is just such a good book. I know that's like an entry-level 40k story, but God, did it ever live up to the hype. Oh, fuck it. Okay, so spoilers. Orokin the Diviner is a chronomancer, right? And he's always had beef with Trazyn because he thinks the latter forced him into the process of Necron biotransference. So, Rowan, I am in the middle of filming.
You promised you wouldn't make any 40k videos. You promised!
How did you know I said that? Is that a gun? There is a long tradition of Magic players producing custom cards simulating their favourite media texts. Type Darth Vader MTG into Google Images and you'll be crushed under an avalanche of players' homemade submissions. Some, like Turn 2 Sol Ring's post to r/custom magic, shows Anakin transforming into Vader upon his death. The narrative throughline of Skywalker's aggressiveness in both forms is shown through how both sides of this card must attack each turn. But the combat style is shown to develop through different keywords. Anakin is reckless but deft, having haste and vigilance. Vader is absolutely terrifying, difficult to beat in one-on-one combat, and an unstoppable force, having menace, first strike, and trample. Others, like Nick Madaus 64's submission to MTG Nexus, focuses on key story beats from A New Hope. Vader is still terrifying, having menace, but here goads a creature when he enters the battlefield, a reference to the immediate nemesis status he attains in the eyes of Luke Skywalker. And for 3 mana, you can tap him to give a creature -2/2, a gameplay rendition of his famous Force Choke. So it is cool and interesting, no matter your perspective on the product range itself, to see what professional games designers can do in this same field with custom art, new mechanics, or fitting reprints. On that topic, Universes Beyond is one of my favourite places to see Magic cards reprinted with new narrative contexts, something that I generally love to see regardless of the product line. Hero's Downfall, once a chase rare and now a decent draft uncommon, indeed how times change, was first printed in Theros, with art depicting an Akroan champion being bested by a Minotaur of Mogis. In everybody's favourite set, Crimson Vow, the card saw a reprint depicting the moment that Odric, a hero of the Church of Avacyn, was transformed into a vampire. The meaning of a hero's downfall expertly tweaked from a literal to more metaphorical demise. In regards to Universes Beyond, Martial Coup is a card that has never made a huge amount of sense to me. A coup means the overthrowing of a governmental power by military force, and often, but not always, in contradiction to the will of the masses, aka the US-backed coup in Chile, or the US-organised coup in Iran, or the US-backed coup in Argentina, or the US-backed coup in Haiti, or the US-backed coup in... Yet, the art and flavour of martial coup has little to do with the army turning on power structures, but rather a people unifying to fight an invading threat. This has always deeply bothered me in a way that I assume is normal, and so when I saw that Martial Coup had been reprinted in the Fallout Commander decks, with art depicting the conclusion of the New Vegas questline Still in the Dark, in which you can lead Head Paladin Hardin to, indeed, stage a martial coup against the leadership of Elder McNamara, the art and mechanics suddenly connected with the name. Martial Coup at last depicted a martial coup. Both the card and I finally felt complete. Again, in a way that I assume is normal. Just as a bit of fun, here are some of the other brilliantly thematic reprints that I love from Universes Beyond. Rancor, depicting the violent grannies who attack you in Freeside whilst playing with the Wild Wasteland quirk in Fallout New Vegas. Farewell, featuring my distant familial relation David Tennant, complete with gut-wrenching flavour text. Shiny Impetus, depicting goaded and fleeing with the One Ring. A Lehman Russ retrofitted into a tractor on an Imperial Agri-World in Swords to Plowshares. A Tzeentch flavoured Chaos Warp, a Gene Stealer's Voxcaster as a Herald's Horn, a Necron-themed Desert of the Glorified, Vault of Whispers, and Catan Shard as their caged son. This Panharmonicon Harmonica. Some cards were seemingly made to retain relevance across multiple worlds of reference. Like, sorry, whoever was the worker to notice that Pure Steel Paladin was a slam dunk fit for a Fallout tie-in, both in name and ability, absolutely crushed the assignment. Universes Beyond has also generated Universes Within, canon replications of these outside IP cards within the scope of Magic's own world. Did you enjoy the mechanics of Chun-Li Countless Kicks, but didn't want to be the person bringing a tie-in deck to your Commander game night? Well, Zethi, Arcane Blade Master, has got you covered, trading a more in-keeping Magic aesthetic for an admittedly less flavourful multi-kicker. It's fascinating to see authenticity played out like this. Zethi appears to be the original Magic card in comparison to the presumed fan-made Chun-Li version, but the reality is inverted. Indeed, before these official Universes Within versions, proxy artists like Force of Wilco were producing canon renditions of these external IP cards, such as Algernon and Linden Kenrith as a proxy for Rick Steadfast Leader. There's something quite beautiful about the unending creativity of Magic players. First, taking Magic mechanics to ape their favourite characters and texts, then retrofitting these Universes Beyond cards into fitting and appropriate slots in Magic's canon. In both cases, feeling naturally less polished, but also having far more heart. Universes Beyond is also, surprisingly, the home of most of Magic's more interesting current design. It's strange that the most aesthetically derivative product in Magic's history is producing some of its most innovative cards and mechanics, but I'll never be saddened by experimentation, and upon examination it becomes more clear why this has lately been the case with Universes Beyond more than canon Magic. Rad counters are a great example. Fallout cards, such as the Wise Mothman, give you rad counters, which cause you to mill cards at the start of your main phase for each rad counter on you, losing life and counters for each non-land card milled this way. This is a phenomenal representation of both real-world radiation, whose half-life causes it to dissipate over time, but which still addles your body and mind as you suffer from it, as well as the gamified version of radiation found in the Fallout series, which lowers your stats and health the more irradiated you become. I struggle to think of what the rad counter mechanic could have represented other than radiation, which would have clicked nearly as well as this. Would we have gotten this interesting take on Mill had we not visited America circa 2026? It's not just whole mechanics, but also individual cards, like River's Song. Her entire mechanical identity is about messing with the basic direction of Magic gameplay, namely where you draw cards from and if you should search your library. This mirrors her existence as a time-travelling anomaly in the world of Doctor Who. Only several seasons of her character being developed, the wife of the Doctor doomed to meet her one-day spouse in reverse, could have made these mechanics make sense. My inner cynic also feels like if I were a worker made to produce IP tie-ins for Magic the Gathering as opposed to original world building, I would at least demand to supplement the stifling of my creativity by being allowed to cut loose in the gameplay mechanics department. You know, if you're gonna force me to produce Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie, you better believe I'm gonna find a way to shoehorn in gorgeous graphics, the entire original cast as voice actors, and innovative enemy pathing AI to appease my inner artist. I've been watching a lot of Noodle lately. Also, what the fuck was I talking about? I compare these complicated mechanics, which make so much sense on developed characters or more metaversal concepts, with the ostensibly straightforward mechanics on side characters from recent in-universe Magic expansions, and find myself wanting. Yaros, Roar of the Old Gods, for example, benefits your face-down creatures for seemingly no narrative reason. His character is all about summoning great and terrible avatars of nature to raise the city of Ravnica to the ground, so why his card is designed to benefit your film noir style disguise creatures is baffling. It should also be noted that whilst many people have been brought into the game space through Universes Beyond and have been encouraged to engage with old media they may well have missed for one reason or another growing up, the product has turned a great number of people off of Magic. Taking a principled position of voting with one's wallet and not buying external IP tie-in products, if not quitting the game entirely. Whilst everyone's reasoning on this issue will be unique, the polarisation is quite stark. It also echoes Italian philosopher Paolo Verno's sentiment that the most brazen cynicism is accompanied by the most unrestrained sentimentalism. One could extend this analysis to a comparison of how the sentimentality of Universes Beyond provokes cynicism in the game's player base, or, indeed, how sentimentality is cynically utilised in Universes Beyond for no other reason than to generate reliable capital bumps for wizards.
And remember, a business is only as good as its people, so treat them well.
This, unfortunately, leads us now on to discussing how the rest of Magic suffers in the shadow of this NutraBullet blend of modern entertainment. Outlaws of Thunder Junction is a doubly empty world. Firstly, as a realm that exists solely to pit quote-unquote iconic villainous Magic characters against each other on a Super Smash Bros. Backdrop of the Wild West. Malcolm, a siren pirate from Ixalan, cavorts alongside Selvala, an elvish diplomat from Fiora, and Oko, a trickster fae from Archive of Our Own. They wear cowboy hats and strut in spurs from sheriff offices to saloons, gunning down bandit town outlaws and train car security alike, depending on what the replayed story beat requires. No narrative matters here. None of these background characters mean anything, they exist solely to accent. Kervek's millennia-spanning hunger for planar domination and subsequent imprisoning in magical amber is transformed into a short beat of wink and nudge gags during a jailbreak sequence. In one particularly telling moment in the story of this set, Kellen encounters Ashiok in a train car, both characters being part of Oko's gang of outlaws. When he reacts negatively to the Nightmare Weaver, the pair's previous interaction being a dire fight, Oko quickly disarms the situation, saying, "Easy kid, whatever history you two share doesn't have a place here." A sentiment that could easily be extended to every colliding aspect of this set. In this regard, Thunder Junction isn't so much a pastiche of westerns, but more a pastiche of Westworld. Both the image of the ultimate theme park from that show, and indeed from Unfinity, whose cards like Gallery of Legends jokingly presented disconnected Magic characters as automata lined up together for convenient amusement, is here played in earnest. Where once War of the Spark excited us with the prospect of Planeswalkers meeting for the first time, and then March of the Machine disappointed us with a multiverse that failed to collide as we had hoped for, Thunder Junction recycles those feelings in a jarring and hollow way. Like our setting, our mechanics too are recycled. The Outlaw grouping merely a rebranding of collected creature types akin to Party, but with less complexity and flavour. Saddle is crew but for creatures, plot is a streamlined foretell. There is nothing new here, but we're made to feel it, whilst the biggest swings of Magic's contemporary experimentation are reserved to plump its new golden goose of external IPs. Whilst mechanical experimentation can be found both in and beyond Magic's multiverse, the game's in-universe canon is where the designers can be brave, push boundaries, question assumptions, and go beyond the notions already explored by established media canon. In Thunder Junction, however, we're given tokens of representation with abject thoughtlessness as to what they mean within this context. Annie Flash is, on a literally skin-deep level, a First Nations woman. An erstwhile outlaw turned lawbringer of Thunder Junction who acts as one of our principal point-of-view characters for the story. But representation comes with responsibility. An uncomfortable responsibility where, in order to properly represent a people, you must encounter the reason why their representation is important, and often why they have been lacking representation in the first place. Thunder Junction, in a microcosm of liberal, race-blind, non-conversation politics and fiction, deigns to have its cake and eat it. Thunder Junction is not America, nor even Westworld. First Nations people do not exist here to be shot for sport by settlers or to pose as exotic set dressing. Annie Flash is not subjected to bigotry or malice because of who she is. She is respected without thought towards the people she is a part of. The cruel reality of how European settlers annihilated the First Nations, driving many tribes to extinction, eradicating culture and language, and stealing communally stewarded land and transforming it into settler bourgeois agriculture and plantations, facilitated directly and explicitly through the labour of enslaved people, all of which is an ongoing, unatoned process not safely relegated to the past, is of course absent. The cowboy flicks of old, on which Thunder Junction is of course based, sanitized the uncomfortable parts of this reality, whilst acknowledging or even celebrating atrocities and racisms still considered as acceptable in their contemporary cultural hegemony. Increasingly, mass media exists which centres indigenous narratives, either directly challenging settler myths and preconceptions, both past, present and potential, or telling stories beyond the framework of colonial dispossession and stepping into true escapism. As Jack said in our recent conversation about Tarkia,
anytime you're dealing with like representation in media, there's this kind of tension between like oftentimes reality is difficult, and like sometimes you don't want to see reality represented because you live it.
Of course, however, some settings cannot be disentangled from these realities. The Wild West, the term itself dripping with implication, is one of these, yet its siren's call compels continued exploration, and corporate notes that pop guns still sell well in stores. Magic is a game, after all. The world builders thus aimed to create a world in which we can play without discourse, where cowboys exist purely as their marketable sign, freed from history. Because in their West, genocide is impossible. Thunder Junction is an empty world beyond just feeling hollow. In the lore as written, the plane was uninhabited by people until the arrival of settlers through omen paths. In order to avoid the touchy subject of whose blood the nation which lionized cowboys is built on, and thus whose land these settler representations are settling, the foundational lie of colonization, terra null, a land without people, is replicated. This undercuts the necessarily racialized identity of Annie Flash. She is a First Nations woman, but from the First Nations of where? She is a settler from another realm, as are all of the characters in this world. Officially, she is Atin, a nomadic people based on the Navajo who quote-unquote found their way to Thunder Junction. Whilst her picture dominates the screen at MagicCon Chicago, it is said that, quote, everyone is a newcomer to this plane, including Annie Flash. It seems the only way Wizards could produce a Western where Native Americans are present, one saccharine and palatable to settler consumption, is to erase the native aspect of said Native American identity. This is not to say there are no attempts to bring real-life issues faced by First Nations people into the story, but they are frustrated from the jump by the world they must be set in. Annie Flash's name, her true Atin name, is Hesea. Her nephew Tommy calls her this in the closing lines of a side story as he decides to leave her for the implied true home of their people. Many millions of people, First Nations people absolutely included, are given or choose to use anglicised names in place of their true names for ease of assimilation with the dominant structure of white supremacy. One of the thousands of subtle but pervasive ways that the identities of colonised and othered people are repressed by cultural hegemony. However, when the narrative refuses to acknowledge the reality of American colonisation, this moment is rendered airless. Why would Hesea and presumably the other Atin like Tommy and Wiley Duke feel compelled to change their names when other characters in this same melting pot setting don't? Why would it be such an emotional shock, provoking tears from Hesea if there is not some element of sanctity to this act? Some need, auto-exploitative or not, to obfuscate her true identity. We, as modern readers, understand the meaning of this quiet and radical act, but only within the context of what we know these people are supposed to represent. Their actual positions in this reality, however, do not back this up, as the rest of the world building is fighting tooth and nail to deny and brush away the very impetus behind this heartbreaking story beat. H.E. Edgman, themselves an absolutely based First Nations person, writes beautifully here. The guilt with which Hesea tends to her nephew's permanent wounds she holds herself responsible for, is palpable, made all the more tragic with Tommy's limited reciprocation and eventual exit from her home and care. I just wish that this writing and that moment could have been given a less tepid and whitewashed foundation to have sprung from. Strangely, even alongside the depoliticized and alienized allegories for First Nations people here, there are natives to Thunder Junction. Flora and fauna, including the questionably sapient cactus folk. Long are the days gone where fantasy species carried interesting and unique names. Now just take the most obvious inspirational origin and staple folk or born or kin on the end and call it a day. They have their own township of Hardbristle and are more than happy to adapt to and aid with the expansion of trade infrastructure and settler society on their unspoiled world. The question of if these newcomers should be taking this land and making it their own is avoided, as the only beings who could actually claim indigeneity are Inhuman, a fun and unconscious replication of the settler dehumanization of colonized people, and never given a chance to articulate a line of dialogue in the entire narrative, let alone a demand for sovereignty, if they are even designed to understand or care for the concept. It is almost comedic to be playing the 1626 Manhattan Purchase in an era of cultural consultancy by way of Baby Yoda. On the topic of justification for settlements, however, it should also be noted that the narrative essentially states that the presence of settlers brought not only civilization to this plane, but the actually basic material basis for one as well. Quoting the flavour of Quick Draw, the opening of the Omen Paths awoke the wild magic of Thunder Junction. Settlers dubbed it Thunder and put it to use in everything from farming tools to deadly weapons. It is one thing to present settlers bringing technology and structures that had yet to be developed by a colonised indigenous population to their world. But to say that the land was metaphysically incapable of allowing for such projects until settlers arrived and literally awoke its true potential is beyond the pale. It's not that oil and coal existed on Turtle Island, just not industrially exploited by its native people. It's that coal and oil were waiting until the right people turned up on its shores before it even popped into being. Even in ardently avoiding the topic of colonisation, settler exceptionalism can simply not help but shine through. Holy cow. Mark Fisher, writing as K-Punk at the time, wrote that postmodern fascism is a disavowed fascism, just as homophobia survives as disavowed homophobia. The strategy is to refuse the identification whilst pursuing the political programme. To that end, Thunder Junction, indeed the entire American project, survives as disavowed settler colonialism. We, of course, deplore that beastly practice, but the land we took is ours now, and the people who took it are heroes with six-shooters. According to sources I spoke to who were aware of the development of Thunder Junction, originally the world was pitched as a dystopia, a post-apocalyptic land ripped apart by portals which grew as a result of aether-infused ecological devastation, now further exploited by, essentially, arcane oil barons, settling the land and plundering resources without care for the sustained impact it will have, all with cowboy hats on. A statement on the environmental impact of, amongst other events, the American settler gold rush, and quite the contrast to the unspoilt world on which Thunder Junction now rests. I would highly recommend reading Amitav Ghosh's The Nutmeg's Curse for further understanding on the intrinsic link between colonization and ecological harm. Additionally, and again, according to my sources, historically, those attempting to realise a Wild West setting in Magic have allegedly been explicitly dissuaded from discussing or featuring the topic of colonisation in the game world during development. The reasons for this are obvious, financially motivated, cowardly, and chauvinistic, considering Magic's willingness to portray colonisation as it pertains the founding of other countries. For the second video in a row now, Iberian colonial vampire. Both versions of Thunder Junction avoid the discourse of colonisation in their own ways. In the original pitch, developed before multiversal omen paths, the people who inhabit the land are building new civilizations, but out of the ruins of their own ancestral societies. They are exploited by individual planeswalkers, but not being cleansed from or forcibly assimilated into new settler structures. In the latter official release, settlements and colonies exist, set up by a multitude of alien people, but just so happen to be claiming truly uninhabited land. Or at least land inhabited by beings more players are comfortably able to dismiss the place-based needs and rights of. Interestingly, this idea of a ruined past civilization has persisted into this new version, with the central treasure-filled MacGuffin of the Vault, but without the people whose ancestors built it. Indeed, the central mystery of what the Vault is answered in the climax of the narrative when Ashiok, revealed to be Jace in disguise, kidnaps the sole living inhabitant of the Vault, Baby Yoda II. We have never seen this made-for-Squishmallow-looking Teemo skin before, and it can only be found at Mythic Rarity on the Vault bonus sheet, which was printed alongside Outlaws in one of 3 collectible variants scattered throughout the different kinds of booster packs that you can open for this set. The forthcomingness to name this new character Loot, the key to everything, renders the card impossible to satirise. I simply mutter, "What are we even doing here, man?" each time I see it, and Jenga another protein bar into my bug-out bag. The child's removal from the vault then triggers the structure to ascend into the stars, revealing itself to be a multi-planar ship of sorts designed by, I think, the Fomori. What came before in Thunder Junction, first being reduced to an archaeological curiosity, something that'd be wasted on the unexploitative natives, and is then transformed into a spacecraft from an advanced civilization. Of course, the idea that complex and great projects discovered by settlers must secretly be the doing of aliens is a consistent trope of colonial narratives. Both are uncritical simulacra of the justifications invented by Europeans to occupy and terramorph uncivilized land. I think back to what Jack said in our Tarkir video, how the people of the colonized societies of Tarkir have lately only been used as action figures in an alien invasion plot. It saddens me that such an analysis has been wrought prophetic, but for an entire setting this time, and without even the good graces of presenting something worth ruining beforehand.
Our job is to plant seeds so our grandkids get to enjoy the fruit.
Another one of the worries espoused by Jack and myself towards the end of our Tarkir video was that not only did the Tarkir we wanted to return to no longer exist in the lore, but also couldn't be done justice within Magic's modern design. The single set structure and often suffocating presence of universes beyond had killed that dream. To that end, the pace and style of contemporary Magic has also diminished the chance of other brilliant experiments seeing the light of day. Another future site, for example, couldn't be made today. The 2007 set depicting the finale of Dominaria's sallow decay into dust and salt had two kinds of cards: normal and future. The former almost exclusively depicted a dead world. Deserts roiling under empty skies, anemic dragons smouldering in the air, and memorials to heroes of dead ages. These cards featured a myriad of mechanics from Magic's past: kicker, shadow, vanishing, morph, bloodthirst and flanking, hellbent and madness, convoke and buyback, cycling and flashback, and even more. Echoes of the game that had came before and presented in an appropriately withered world. There were a number of new mechanics, of course. Flash was finally keyworded, Suspend played with the timing and different zones of the game in a way that had only been experimented with once before in Magic's history, and Split Second referenced the often purposefully unacknowledged stack of the game, a place very much under the hood of Magic's machine where immersion goes to die via fan belt accident. Split Second modified the rules of the stack as a zone in a way that has never been done before or since, and, as we shall see, many cards in this block played with the frame of the game in ways that seem tame from today's perspective, but which were unprecedented at the time. These new mechanics, one which sped up time, one which slowed it down, and one which bypassed it altogether, were phenomenal. These innovations, coupled with a messy cavalcade of past mechanics, made the message of this block clear. The old is dying, said most of these cards, whilst others announced, and the new is being born. Future Sight's future cards were experimental spectacles, the finale of 3 acts spanning the rest of the block. These were special and limited cards printed in a curved frame, delightfully sentimented in what cutting edge looked like back in the mid-2000s, with brand new mechanics, worlds, and aesthetics. Time Spiral, the first set in the block, had printed time-shifted special cards, old border and old art reprints of a select few cards from Magic's past, demonstrating the warping of time that was occurring in the set's story. Planar Chaos printed plane-shifted cards, functional reprints of more past Magic cards but shifted into new colours. A pastiche product, simultaneously looking backward and readjusting old cards into new design sensibilities, making Prodigal Sorcerer a more appropriate red card, Prodigal Pyromancer, but also questioning these contemporary boundaries, asking if White's monopoly on Serra Angel-style creatures couldn't be shared with Blue, and if taxing counter-magic couldn't find a home in White. Future Sight took the logical next step and blew the casket off of What If, contrasting a tired world and recycled old mechanics with popping artwork and bold new ideas. Tarmogoyf referenced the as-yet non-existent Planeswalker subtype, as Steamflogger Boss did with Contraptions. Yixlid Jailer looked forward into a new and still unexplored Cenobite Perma-Hell world, with a graveyard hate mechanic that seemed like it was designed to combat a threat that had yet to materialise. Imperial Mask told casters to give your teammates a copy of it, lacking any explanation of who a teammate could be or what structure of play you could legally acquire one in. There were new mechanics: Poisonous, Fate Seal, Delve, Absorb, Aura Swap, Fortify, Gravestorm, Grandeur, all but a handful of whom have seen no reprints, functional or not, in products that followed. But even those that did get expanded upon needed to have satisfying payoffs to their original mystery. Why did it matter that Ghostfire was colourless? What the fuck was a Kithkin, and why did some seem pleasant and lovely, whilst others were painted by Omar Rian? These cards still hold great intrigue and wonder for players old and new, with excitement rising each time it is announced that they will be reprinted in upcoming sets, like Avon Mind Sensor in Amonkhet or Grinning Ingus in Strixhaven. It unfailingly feels like the future is arriving each time they appear for the first time in a set's world. Some were powerful, remaking formats like Invaders from an advanced century, overwhelming the present day with new technology. Others were, and are, simply perplexing, like reading a book written 200 years from now and failing to understand the parlance that appears to be commonplace in these new times. Magic could make Future Sight in 2007 because the future still existed. The game was still relatively young, just over a decade old, and was still opening up to structural experiments and new formats. Now, there is nowhere for the future to hide. Future Sight and Modern Horizons are often compared, love letters to Magic's past and highly advanced limited environments to play in. However, Modern Horizons is just the first half of Future Sight. Glances backwards, nods to the past, reimaginings of what's come before, with little to no envisioning of what comes next. Every quote-unquote new mechanic in Modern Horizons 2 is a riff on an old one. Affinity for tokens, and Devour artifacts. Combinations of inherently synergistic keywords like Reinforce and Scavenge, or Plane Cycling and Eternalize. There's nothing jarring and head-scratching here. No Bloodshot Trainee or Bridge from Below or Norrin the Wary or Scrib Ranger. Things that challenged players to work out if these bizarre, obtuse, contradictory pieces of cardstock were secretly busted or just confusingly bad. For many Future Sight cards, players had to wait for them to become good. The same is simply not the case for the oxymoronically named Modern Horizons, where the horizon arrives the instant it is envisioned. To be fair and balanced and unbiased and sexy, there are a handful of individually innovative cards here, ones that may form the heart of a new deck once more pieces come together. Garth One Eye conjuring Black Lotus copies is an unbelievable delight, and Void Mirror feels like it's only one asymmetrical possibility storm away from becoming a hardlock combo piece. But in a sea of high-powered remixes and uninteresting draft filler, these can't help but feel lonesome. This, I should stress, is not the fault of lazy or unimaginative games designers. In 2013, there were 5 sets and 1 Commander deck series with a total of 9 new mechanics added into the game. In 2023, there were 7 sets and 7 Commander products with 18 brand new mechanics, double that of a decade ago. Bear in mind as well that new mechanics introduced in the old 3-block structure would often go on to form the mechanical backbone of at least 2 future sets. There is increasingly less and less space to innovate. There is no time to rest on broken ground, to wring every potential interesting feature from a mechanic before moving on. The designers must always be digging for new treasure. The worlds nodded at as well are either well-trodden or devoid of character. The harsh Cenobite terror of Yixalid Jailer's unknown realm lies in stark contrast to the ambiguous non-place of Junk Winder's trash heap. I look at Glimpse of Tomorrow and wonder if I'm supposed to recognise this vista, or if this is a world yet unexplored. No one's coming from the future anymore. The time machines can't keep up. The slow cancellation of the future, as Franco Berardi put it, didn't happen overnight to Magic. There was, and in some ways still is, a game with a future before it. But rapid proliferation of Magic product has forced the arrival of the future into a pressurized nozzle, where once players would see mechanics and ideas teased out over time, we are increasingly given everything we want as rapidly as possible. Where once players seeking to build decks around niche themes would have to make tactical sacrifices or innovate using ostensibly non-synergistic cards due to limited production, new game concepts and support are now splattered onto our proverbial over-buttered toast. Players have been trying to make energy happen in Commander since Kaladesh. Here's 3 new commanders to play with at least 2 in the same colours on their way shortly. Players enjoyed the alternate win con of Revel in Riches. Print treasure cards in every set forevermore, along with clues and food. Enjoying the joke of Fibblefip's many cameos? Well, we've increased them 20-fold and printed him on 3 new cards. Craving reprints? They'll show up in the list and remastered products. The prevalence of remastered products is a great cog in this futureless malaise, re-exploring the greatest hits from old blocks and worlds like Ravnica with nostalgia goggles on. These are not just soulless cash-ins, but key components in our hauntological now, where the cultural past persists like a ghost, filling the gaps left by the absence of the new. The retro-framed, hallowed fountain is an icon of this, a complex object which satisfies a deep longing to experience an old form again. On a primary level, its existence lets new players play with game objects that they otherwise may lack access to. For those who played with the original cards, on a deeper level, it gratifies a deeper and more properly nostalgic desire to return to an older period and to live its strange old aesthetic artifacts through once again. There is a dual-pronged approach in Magic's aesthetic design right now. New kinds of foils, frame treatments, serializations and alt art collectibles are pumped into the game in a doomed attempt to recapture the desire to chase scarce and shining artifacts. At the same time, the old border is trotted out with increasing frequency, like an aging heartthrob made to wither under the spotlight in order to bolster love and support for an increasingly estranged franchise. This is as desperate as it is ineffectual. A cloying for nostalgia that both frantically desecrates and pathetically reveres the game's history. Of course, this particular nostalgia is a false one. The retro frame is a signifier of Magic's past, but these cards never originally looked like this. The earliest printing of Ravnican cards was in the modern frame of Mirrodin onwards. It is a simulation of a simulation, the artificial crackle added under a funk LP that has never been pressed to vinyl. Time is flattened and truncated. There is a current frame and the old frame, the singularly existing past and the eternal now. The earliest experiments and awkward growing pains between the two, white borders, washed out mana symbols, whatever the fuck the portal card's whole deal was, etc. are forgotten. The indeterminate past of Magic canonized with a single aesthetic, adaptable based on market desires, neutered of the process of history. Not that every reframing of the new in an old border is a shallow nostalgia grab, however. As was pointed out by one of my patrons, there was a series of Secret Lair Planeswalker cards printed in the old border with meandering and complicated rules text. This was both by design and due to necessity. The Planeswalker card is a symbol of modern Magic, a key image of the game in ascendant popularity, which warped both the game and the traditional frame around it. Unbroken straight lines became curved, with elements of the character's artwork escaping from the bounds of their portrait, a technique pioneered by the tragically slain silver border sets. An entirely new text box and icons denoting the various loyalty abilities of the Planeswalker had to be invented. As Old Border Dak Faden, one of modern Magic's most simple Planeswalkers, demonstrates, the rules that allow these cards to function could never have worked at this game's inception. The staggeringly difficult to follow 11 lines of rules text, peppered with enough caveats and reminders to make even Chains of Mephistopheles This shit is so complicated, it makes chains of Mephistopheles look like a French vanilla in comparison. You have no idea how many takes I did before I just decided to say fuck it and break out the phonetics. Phonetics? Phonetics! Jesus Christ! Old Border Dak Faden is totally bereft of the streamlining we've come to expect from Magic the Gathering. It's both a joke and a statement. It's plainly ridiculous, but in a way that says, look how far we've come. What we make in this game today would be unthinkable 20 years ago. There are a total of 7 Old Border Planeswalkers, 3 from 2021 and 4 from 2022. The latter grouping disappoints and undermines the former's seeming purpose by streamlining their rules text to include the clear modal writing form of modern cards, employing dashes and line breaks in a way that no truly old Magic card would have. These, to me, serve less the function of demonstrating Magic's distance from its past, and more so simply encouraging us to view its past through those same nostalgia goggles. The speed at which the new becomes the past in this game is startling. Only Cult Anvil received its own Old Border treatment a little over a year ago, and its first and only non-special treatment printing is still, at time of writing, legal in Standard. Its detailed, foreboding, and brutal digital art clashing unfavourably with a frame stuck in the mid-90s of graphics design, like Martin Scorsese's The Irishman playing on the screen of a Nintendo 3DS. Modern Horizons 3 boasts new cards for the Eldrazi Titans, Emrakul and more, in a recently developed colourless quote-unquote Old Border, which is just the original artifact Old Border but intentionally washed out, a nostalgia bump for a past that never existed. Not to belabour our stay in Modern Horizons 3, as the set has yet to fully release at time of writing, but I can't move on without pointing out how this set has all the air of Whispers of the Old Gods. Innocent characters from the game's past are warped by the corrupting influence of an eldritch titan. Whilst it worked for Hearthstone, a game which from the jump was a parody product of sorts, and whilst Eldritch Moon had similar beats specifically for Innistrad, this feels so much more hollow. The once truly unknowable horror of the Eldrazi, whose transparent frame, twisted artwork, and massive casting costs once cemented them as a truly new and feared being, are now repackaged as reference fodder. The mystery and awe once felt is reduced to aesthetic recognizability. The Rootwaller and Goblins still act in accordance to their original drives and their original cards and mechanics. They just do so with tentacles attached and with Old Border special treatments. Roughly 10% of all of Magic's cards printed in the Old Border have been printed in the last 3 years. Almost all of them received this framing for their first time in this period, many of them seeing their first normal printing in this time frame too. Some cards have now only been printed in special treatments. Urza, Chief Artificer, can only be played with in either the Old Border or the inaccurately named borderless versions. It has all the air of travel insurance packages which range from gold to diamond. Our customers deserve nothing short of constant luxury. Normality is literally sometimes not an option. Returning to Ravnica Remastered, Dark Confidant saw a reprint here with brand new art and in the Old Border for the first time. Its origins as a modern framed player invitational card overwritten to serve a bizarre concoction of simultaneous fresh novelty and faux nostalgia. If Hallowed Fountain was first printed in the modern frame, does that make the frame of today's Magic cards postmodern? Time Spiral Remastered is truly the pinnacle of this concept. A curated selection of what was supposed to be a reflection of Magic's past and look into its future, now rendered in uniform sterility. The cards which made Time Spiral Block unique, the bizarre game objects like the self-sabotaging Volcano Hellion and hyper-specific hate piece of Tivadar Thorn, as well as the colour-shifted curiosities like Shrouded Lore and mysterious experiments like the aforementioned Imperial Mask, are mostly absent. The remastered product instead chose to reprint the successful cards, both those that once received special treatment like Doomsday and Tarmogoyf, and those that didn't, Pongify and Children of Corliss to name a few. Cards which have either proven themselves to be powerful game pieces in already existing decks, or which form the basis of a more streamlined draft experience. In sanding off the edges of Time Spiral Block, designers avoided player disappointment in opening double-take-worthy pieces like Force of Savagery's perplexing stat line, and also arguably improved the draft experience. One of the sets I consistently hear touted as modern Magic's best limited environments is Time Spiral Remastered. But it also missed the point of what Time Spiral Block originally represented. No longer is there the feeling that this is what Magic could be. That has been replaced with this is what Magic was and is. As you may have also noticed, the frame treatments that once differentiated future and planar shifted cards from the rest were removed, and in doing so, much of their original meaning dissolved. Justin Sweet's frightening composition on the original Blade of the Sixth Pride, the hooked weapons, apocalyptic skies, flayed skin armor, and terrifying snarl of this cat is challenging. The near-perfect white of the ground she stands on gives the impression that we have just snapped this picture with our camera flash, capturing the deadly speed of this warrior as she spins her head towards us before the light even dissipates. This amazing artwork wouldn't fit in the frame it was originally designed to break free from, and has been replaced with a piece by Lars Grant West. By no means an incompetent or meritless composition, but unfortunately conformist in comparison. One of these cards was originally a sneak preview into Magic's potential future. Another is a colour-shifted card. Laid out amongst their new contemporaries in Time Spiral Remastered and removed from their experimental frames, however, it is impossible to tell unless you have an astute understanding of established design conventions in Magic, or saw them in their original form. Even then, you may have forgotten. New Simulacra overlaying the old. This all comes to a philosophically fascinating head with Time Spiral Remastered's remix on the time-shifted theme. Here, cards printed around the time of, or after original Time Spiral are reprinted in the same retro frame as the original set's time-shifted cards were. The retro frame Eternal Witness asks you to remember Magic's past, whilst Chris Rand's new artwork obfuscates the uncomfortable reality of the original card's artist and her politics. A simulacra of the original Eternal Witness, and the sole card in this series to not be printed with its original artwork. Quite the contrast to the original Time Spiral team's decision to reprint Enduring Renewal and Darkness with artwork from their original artist, as all of the original time-shifted cards were. Forgive me for engaging in lesser evilism here, but I would argue that an artist being a secret right-winger who got caught liking reactionary and bigoted tweets, and who apparently donated her own artwork to a QAnon conspiracy podcast so anti-Semitic that YouTube deleted their channel, is slightly less bad than one sharing all the drawings of swastikas they've made whilst comparing Hitler to Jesus and grieving his death all on their Facebook page. May all Nazis' teeth rot like his have. The fascinating part is that none of these cards needed to be chosen for reprinting like this. Magic had 50 or so sets under its belt by the time Time Spiral released, and well over quadruple that when it was remastered. There was no need to seek nostalgia through either a false sanitization of the past or through an honest remembrance of the multiple times you worked with one of America's most repulsive fascists. And believe me, I've seen that show. That's some stiff competition your man was beating out there. Fuck. Dipping back into universes beyond, we can see this sanitization come through in new ways of rewriting unreality. Ace, fearless rebel, depicts the Seventh Doctor's companion striking a Dalek. We see her jacket emblazoned with badges and patches as it was in the show, but the red star on her sleeve stands out in particular. Every other adornment is busy with lettering, symbols, and colours. This one is a red void, feeling out of place amongst the rest. Of course, fans of the show would know that this patch was, in fact, filled with a Soviet hammer and sickle. Ace was a radical working-class teenager who we are introduced to already in trouble with the British state after she burnt down a house. She did so in a fit of rage after neo-Nazis threw a Molotov cocktail into her friend Manisha's house. Nazis, of course, being first and foremost hyper-reactionary anti-communists. This card is a simulation of Ace. Herself a simulation of, at the time, contemporary British working-class anxieties. The dismantling of worker and trade union power, as well as the social democratic welfare state under Thatcher. The rise of fascist movements like the British National Party and National Front, and the waning promise of a proletarian alternative as the curtains began to close on the USSR. Here, the hammer and sickle is scrubbed, leaving an appropriately empty star. The symbol of nebulous radicalism with all the uncomfortable and specific politics wiped clean. Designers, at the behest of the bourgeois owner class, are compelled to explore exciting notions and artifacts, themes of rebellion and reprinted game tools, through true nostalgia goggles, where only the positive, marketable and discourse-free elements shall be remembered and rejoiced. Of course, the inherent irony of attempting to depoliticize remembrance is that it highlights exactly what you seek to forget. The desire for a sterile past comes through not just from WotC, but from the player base itself. When the Universes Beyond 40k Commander decks were released, players were grateful for a reprint of Darkness, one that both lowered the card's price and also came without a decaying scumfuck's artwork printed on it. This despite the fact that players have, and always have had, the power to simply proxy their own versions with the artwork removed, or replaced with any artwork they wish to see instead, for free, outside of tournament play. Much as was the case with the initial wave of backlash against the Walking Dead secret lair, where there was a self-important content mill-led attempt to create a new play structure that banned the use of Universe Beyond cards, there is a desire for authority to set the parameters of the simulation. Asking for someone to not play certain cards around your table requires one to push against the imaginary bounds of Disneyland. It's uncomfortable. It necessitates interpersonal conflict. It is easier to be than it is to become, and rather than be a bother for even a single second, most of us would prefer it if our wishes were simply imposed upon us by Mickey Mouse himself. But do we even want the future? What on earth does the future have in store for us? A climate catastrophe? Nuclear war? AI overriding all creativity? What does the future actually look like? When was the last time that you had hope for, hell, experienced a narrative that saw the future as a hopeful place? I see snippets from this video often floating around as a positive vision of tomorrow. So-called solar punk, an identity as quickly packaged and commodified as it was named. It's an animation envisioning a bright future of clean energy, unalienated labour assisted by green technology, a community interwoven with family and work, flying public transport, and balance between the metropole and rural settlements. Here, the future is a sunny Studio Ghibli vision. Indeed, the score is even by longtime Studio Ghibli composer Joe Hisaishi. It is an undeniably beautiful and hopeful snapshot of what could be. The sole catch of this animation being that it's a commercial for yogurt. Once you notice it, the product placement ruptures your enjoyment. The voiceover, which talks about the necessity of planting seeds, of how a business is only as good as its people. The massive fucking letters directing you to a dairy product company at the end. Even the studio responsible for the animation admit in its YouTube description that this is, quote, not a perfect utopia. Almost certainly in reference to the jarring disposable plastic dotting this otherwise sustainable vision. As the most popular comment under this video reads, In this universe, people would absolutely not be eating and drinking out of single-use Chobani cups and cartons. Lamau. Lamau indeed! But even Dear Alice, the name of this commercial, holds more hope than Magic's visions of tomorrow. The few Magic worlds which explore the future do so in either terrifying or conservative ways. Many, if not all, of the individual aspects of New Phyrexia are twisted parodies of historical societal pillars and ills. Orthodox religion, social Darwinism, forced assimilation, etc. But the overarching narrative of these New Phyrexians, all will be one, represents a fundamentally revolutionary mode of existence. A totalitarian unity synonymous with most Western pictures of pure communism, intertwined with the background radiation of our proto-fascistic fear of the bodily other. The horror of the collective superseding the individual is hammered home by the cruel genetic experimentation, body modification, and brainwashing, all made possible with advanced and arcane technology. Mirrodin before it was similarly technological, but held no revelatory social advancements. All 5 cultures were either rooted in semi-feudal relations, bands of noble and ignoble savages, or spiritual and opportunistic sectarians, with one sole group of aspirational technocrats. The Videlcan, who I assume would be called blue folk or brainkin if they were designed today, are obsessed with progress and discovery. The only people really looking forward in this world. They, in turn, become one of the first people to be swayed and overtaken by Phyrexia as it grows, the representatives of the future in this narrative being the harbingers of its catastrophe. Even the outside IPs now in Magic which examine the future are fraught with terror, namely Fallout and 40k. The former displays the horrors of a nuclear apocalypse born in a Cold War which has never gone away. The latter displays an utter cynicism for what comes next, where societies whose rules and structures break away from our human past and present are either decayed or embattled by an ascendant humanity driven forward by hyperfascism and a dogmatic rejection of curiosity and development. The most hopeful representation of the future is found in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which presents an illuminated faux Japan where spirituality and technology are interwoven. But this is a hollow hope, a replication of the modern liberal order. Private property, crime, jobs, adverts, personal vehicles, etc., but with LED decals. Characters from a millennia ago still walk the streets. Ancient trees shelter skyscrapers. Dozens of sagas retell the tales of legends whose stories are largely reflected in the world around them. The Aki are still upstart, an emperor still rules. If you discount the mecha and holograms, what is actually futuristic about this place? Is the best that we can hope for in the future a more illuminated and semi-real landscape to accompany our floating drive to the office? When Times Square installed its first LCD billboard, did the future arrive? Or did the mundane just get a little more advanced? When the majority of our media either looks backwards fondly or forward in fear, it is no surprise that we seek comfort in known unrealities. Nuclear apocalypse is terrifying, but Fallout is reassuring. This is a negative comfort, though, in that it is, in reality, only the absence of the discomfort found in pushing against the status quo, both materially and culturally. As Mark Fisher lays out, and as Berardi argues, the intensity and precarity of late capitalist work culture leaves people in a state where they are simultaneously exhausted and overstimulated. The combination of precarious work and digital communication leads to a besieging of attention. Retro offers the quick and easy promise of a minimal variation on an already familiar satisfaction. We stick with what we know because our time is stretched so thin that seeking the new is too great a challenge to pose on the gaps between labour and information overstimulation. Not that the new is even easy to seek out. A handful of near-monopolistic media companies program what we watch, the distinct majority of it being sequels, remakes, reboots, universe expansions, and pastiches. Do you want to watch your superhero movie, your superhero show, or your show about why superheroes are bad, complete with all the brand tie-ins mocked by its own text, itself being a sanitized remake of a shit and horrifically bigoted series of graphic novels? All of which I'm sure will be coming to a Universe Beyond tie-in in 4 years' time, long after the heyday of the IP's popularity. As Fisher continues, despite all its rhetoric of novelty and innovation, neoliberal capitalism has gradually but systemically deprived artists of the resources necessary to produce the new. In the UK, the post-war welfare state and higher education maintenance grants constituted an indirect source of funding for most of the experiments in popular culture between the 1960s and 80s. As public service broadcasting became marketized, there was an increased tendency to turn out culture productions that resembled what was already successful. Does that remind you of anything? You cannot be what you cannot see, and through the commodification of all artifacts of human endeavour, from shelter to love to play, we are being denied a vision of the future.
So, eat well, Alice, and keep planting those seeds. Because how we eat today feeds tomorrow.
This all comes with the caveat that analysis of why Magic today is flawed should not retroactively uphold Magic's past as some kind of perfect system that was only ruined when Street Fighter tie-ins were being made. This is just a simulation of nostalgia responding to the simulacra of nostalgia being pumped out as new old border cards. Magic has always existed as either a commodity or aspirationally as one. This is, and was, a product to sell. Many errors have been made, many potentials have been disregarded in pursuit of profit. It has admittedly gotten far more acute in the last 5 years. The decision to abandon the silver border in order that unsets would have a larger audience to market to is a pretty clear example of that in practice, and also of the less ideal effects it has had, both within the game environment of this highly criticised set itself, and on formats like Legacy, currently in the grip of discourse as to how to deal with sticker cards in high-level play.
All right. I'm going to play Blank Goblin, which is known as Name Sticker Goblin.
Oh, no.
In the circles that I roll in. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may put a name sticker on it. It's Legacy playable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Legacy.
I seriously feel like I'm blacking out right now.
Not only legal in Legacy, but like actively playable.
Bring at least 10 unique sticker sheets. No repeat sheets. That's cheats.
Of course, however, this is not to say that shrinking innovations and questionable business practices have produced a wholly bad entertainment product either. For all of my griping about Outlaws at Thunder Junction, or whatever the name of that set is, I'll be the first to say that Saddle is both derivative of and an improvement on Crew, being far more tactical and with wider design space than the latter. Games are still fun. New cards can still be interesting. Designers are still creating competent and fun limited environments. The future is not dead, remember, just slowly being cancelled. The idea that Magic has sold out as a result of Universes Beyond is also silly. Where once this game had the categorization of counterculture thrust upon it during the satanic panic of the 90s, and where older stories told more unique and less derivative tales, at least in detail if not in broad structure and message, the game, and thus its marketability, has always come first. Marshall McLuhan's erudite theory that the medium is the message remains significant in our contemporary media analysis and in our understanding of Magic. Whilst the intertwining of story and gameplay is what sets Magic apart from its less lore-heavy contemporaries, the story, the message, has never and will never be more important than the medium. the game commodity. Fortnite got a secret lair for the same reason that Annie Flash's identity as a First Nations woman was included, only to be left superficial, warped, and in the story's background, for the same reason that, in response to the Satanic Panic, much of Magic's art was changed and the demon subtype was temporarily removed. The game sells better this way. We've spent the last, amount of time bemoaning hyperreality, my place in it, and the desperate futurelessness of it, but what can we actually do? Baudrillard theorized that because the stagnation of culture arose from constant marketization and consumption, only gift-giving can break free from the monotony. To defy the system with a To defy the system with a gift to which it cannot respond save by its own collapse and death, nothing, not even the system, can avoid this symbolic obligation. It is in this trap that the only chance of catastrophe for capital remains. In my interpretation, because a gift holds symbolic value beyond expressions of exchange and use, only counter-gifts can be properly exchanged in response. A gift given to you by a loved one, which sets them back $50, and a gift given by another, which costs them nothing beyond labour, are usually ascribed different symbolic values untethered to their exchange value, and responded to in kind, and with only a gift itself. If social reproduction becomes more propelled by this concept of gift exchange over exchange value, capital will simply be unable to maintain itself as the foundation of society. Of course, however, this is easier said than done when we need money to live, and besides, capitalism has already partially commodified the concept of gift giving. We can see it in the cultural non-entity of Fortnite. It's currently borrowing from Roblox, another late capitalist media monster, tasking its users to create new maps, rule systems, and models that will lessen the load on the owner's capital expenditures and allow them to hire fewer and fire more workers. The encouragement of content being created for free under the guise of community, but with the hope, if not goal, of generating surplus value from mass voluntary child labour. Online commentators, myself included, fall into this as well. I criticise and praise Magic the Gathering in ways I believe are sound and in good faith, but I also promote the proliferation of the game. Both explicitly, remember, code SPICE at checkout for coolstuffinc.com for 5% off of any order. Again, not a bit, but an actual sponsor read. But also organically. Comments under gameplay videos I appear in tell of how I got the user into the game. I am an advert for Wizards of the Coast that they don't have to pay for. Most everybody who makes videos like I do are the same. Even in critiquing the elements I feel are bad, I cannot help but uphold the good as a counterpoint. Innovative mechanics, great stories, a medium to socialize and to make friends through. I think back to that Fisher quote where he's laying out Berardi's thesis on why we seek nostalgia, and particularly retro. How our overstimulation of information has led us to seek familiar satisfaction. I think about the videos that I watch on YouTube. Video essays about media that I have never consumed. Video games, movies, books. I think about the videos that I make. What I'm choosing to utilize my creativity to make. Analysis about other people's products. I wonder how much of my engagement with genuine creativity, as much as it can exist under neoliberalism, comes regurgitated through video essay form. I wonder how much you, watching this video and presumably others that I have made, also feel about this. But we are not without hope and a means to act. Gift giving cannot be totally recuperated by capital. Indeed, the fragility of capital's stranglehold on free expression can sometimes be revealed in beautiful acts of gift giving itself. Dear Alice has a non-commodified version, produced well within the bounds of transformative fair use by Waffle to the Left, a video essayist from Canada. In it, all references to the dairy company have been scrubbed, the music removed, and the voiceover replaced with diegetic sounds painstakingly stitched together from Creative Commons files. Suddenly, the narrative presented to us in this ad, one of planting seeds for tomorrow, of good business and caring about the earth, all in liminal service to the goal of selling you a philanthropist's expensive yogurt, is ejected. In its place, we simply see a potential for the future. People collaborating, sharing food, going to school, simply existing amongst clean technology. Subtle changes such as the fruit being harvested and placed in a trailer marked commons rather than donations demonstrates this far more radical and revolutionary imagining of our future. The quiet piece of Waffle to the Left's remaking of Dear Alice is still a simulation of a simulation. Still a product in as far as it is monetized on YouTube. You will never hear me admonishing a creative for securing some scratch in a non-exploitative way under capitalism, though. I'm a communist, not a dickhead. But this radical act of allowing the artist and animator's vision of the future to step out from the shackles and shadow of the necessary corporate product placement is beautiful to behold. Even the note on the fridge at the end, the script for the original voiceover, fits in with this demarketized vision. The line, "A business is only as good as its people, so treat them well," is pinned beside a Polaroid of an old woman and a much younger Alice. But even in the original, the animation shows us not a business owner, but a co-worker. At most, the matriarch of a family organization. As a result, this line in the ad feels jarring, an obvious corporate addition. In this non-commodified version, this line can instead be read as a relic of a past generation. The idea of a business, of ownership, naught but a faded memory, magnetized to a fridge door. The sky at the end, free from the company logo, is open and vast. The shot lingers here, originally to maximize the time the branding remained on screen, but now simply holding for the sake of enjoying the view. It feels uncaged, all done for no other reason than to give the gift of the animator's art back to them and to the world untainted. You forget even the spelling of the word that used to block the full sky from your vision as you watch this version. As mentioned towards the start, when Netrunner perished as a commodity, it was unofficially resurrected by a community of fans who had maintained and developed its structure of play for no other reason than they love the game. To create and to do as a gift to others and to yourself is a radical act. But what benefits others, be it maintaining infrastructure for a genuine community of people to enjoy entertainment media, or helping your friends to organize their workplaces and communities, cannot help but transform into mutual aid. To give the gift of aid to others is to invariably relish in the fruits of it for yourself, be it through a better experience in a game or the increased pressure for your own company to improve working conditions. And it's through such demarketized networks that true experimentation can arise. Demarketization is indeed a necessary goal to reach in order to escape this malaise. As Mark Fisher deftly pointed out over a decade ago in response to news that Jonathan Ross would be receiving an £18 million contract to present for the BBC, imagine if that was instead spent, risked on what British television sorely lacks: writers. You could pay scores of writers a good wage for years. The BBC ought to be in a position to cushion its creative staff from the pressure of producing immediate successes. And contrary to the neoliberal logic which insists that people are best motivated by fear and money, it is that cushioning which facilitates a certain kind of cultural entrepreneurialism. I can attest to this. Almost all of the videos I have made, which I consider to be my best, have come out after my Patreon earnings rose from generous to the point of being livable. I have the time and space to do deep dives and philosophical examinations like this because you lot subsidize my ability to disappear for months on end and learn to read text that I have no formal training to properly understand. But it shouldn't just be a small group of lucky creatives, most of us well positioned already within the social and economic structures we exist in, who get to experience this chance to creatively experiment. Publicly owned and funded creative infrastructure is just one necessary step towards a more liberated creative output. And I mean genuinely publicly owned. Not just taxpayer-subsidised crash pads for nepo babies and client journalists gatekept by reactionaries who are selling it off piecemeal to the American market, who we are increasingly subservient to. As I wrote this conclusion, Chris Cox, the multimillionaire CEO of Hasbro, who again oversaw the firing of over 1,000 employees in the run-up to Christmas, either to reach annual growth goals or, I don't know, to make the Grinch look like a wimpy bitch, has come out and extolled the virtues of AI-generated content in upcoming Magic and D&D products. AI, the misnomer attributed to machine learning image scraping software and procedural text generators, represents a new postmodern apex for simulation. Where once creatives would be pressured by the results of algorithmic analysis and market predictions to replicate culture in new monetizable ways, AI does away with the pretense and simply steals, uncredited, the work of past generations of artists, writers, editors, and innovators. So-called AI slaps together disconnected artistic elements or individual creatives' entire portfolios in a profane amalgam of a permanently recycled culture. A digital Habsburg, if you will. The structure of neoliberalism frustrates our ability to envision the future and to create the new, and AI, at the whim of our ruling class, enshrines this fetter as the sole and most profitable mode of production. Imagination is unnecessary when the market desires only replication. Today, as Disneyland was to Baudrillard in the 80s, AI represents the regeneration of the imaginary as waste treatment plants are elsewhere. Everywhere today one must recycle waste, and the dreams, the phantasms, the historical, fairy-like, legendary imagination of children and adults is a waste product, the first toxic excrement of a hyperreal civilization. I don't know why Baudrillard is from the Bronx now, but he is, baby! I love the Mets! Hyperreality may dominate our lives, and the lives of those around us, and both neoliberal hegemony and the fascism it incubates are designed to extort our ability and desire to give freely. But through organisation, mutual assistance, and supporting grassroots culture, born from honest agony and defiance under this system and not passed down from on high, we may yet imagine a future and bring it to bear. You have the power to picture tomorrow and to create art that will transport you there. It may not be successful. It may only be appreciated by a dozen locals at an open mic or 14 followers on social media, but it is yours, and it is free. And it is free. To summarise my thoughts on the Fortniteification of Magic the Gathering, do not be comforted by the offerings of a system designed to extort you. Be comforted by the gifts of those railing against it, and join us to fight for a different way. Okay, so the Emperor's children are a corrupted space marine squad who worship the chaos god Slanesh, led by the serpentine and twisted Primarch Fulgrim. He was corrupted by the sword.
You promised you wouldn't make any.
No! A massive thank you to Leo Verissimo for creating the Dear Alice VCR segments of this video. A big old thank you to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this channel, and a extra special thank you to all of my patrons who continue to support my work, whose names include Mopkins, 1234 I Declare a Class War, 3D0, a communist right dimple, a filthy communist bunny, a gay American couple, a treasure token featuring Spice 8 Rack's face, a waste of a perfectly good skeleton, A, B, C, D, F, E, G, H, K, I, J, L, N, M, O, P, Q, S, R, T, V, W, U, X, Y, Z, Adam Gable, Aesthetic Dialectic, Agent Maxwell, AJ Ingram, Alicia Carnan, Alex Berman, Aglai D. Siswai, Alice Perales, Ali, an alt-right sleeper agent who gives money to communists because Idaka probably Tybalt's persona, I draw penises on pastries, an entire council of ghosts, an exhausted capybara, an Umbreon pastry, Andrew Elf, Anne Morgana. Anthrocarbon has more issues than National Geographic but keeps on turning pages because printer ink smells exquisite. April Doe, Asmeranda Mardika Distillacalda Car's cooking blog, Astra Jade, or Abraxas Siberia, Austin L, Bacchus 98, Basu Gasu Bakuhatsu Bakumatsu, Bazinga Bongos Badonkadonk Need Love 2, Beefcake, Ben Zimet, Burbseed, Blake Evers, Brad Rutherford, Brett Lewis, Brian Dunn, Brian Rodham, Bridget Huang Tong, but you can call me Thrakazod, Bayradiktor HK Bergdahal. There is no way on hell that I've gotten that right. Cacophony, Caleb Burley, Caleb Blake, Kalulu, just Kalulu, Captain Colostomy, Carl, or is it Carl? That's the question. Charles Cohen, Chelsea Talbot, Chromie, Chris DeVos, Chris Kitsune Campbell, Clay, and finally my most favourite patron, Clint Oliveres. Cognitive Glitch, Conflicted Psyches, Connor Rentz, Cube Artisan, Daniel Morris, Darius Rudaminer, Dark Kijin, David Reynolds, Devon McCullough, Duncan Lindsay, Earl Grey T, Edward Gordon, Eldritch Changeling, Elish Norn will forever be my #1 waifu, please step on me, Eric Lindhall, Erin Slauber, Etienne Champion Masson, Yves Mizgala, Faxel, Future Beagle, Gavin Verhey, Gayula, Queen Among Bears, Georg Andresen, Georgi Lyubanov, Hitu Nullmage, Give It To Me, That Thing, The Picture of Your Rats, Grey Days, Guilty Sonder, Gundy, Have You Considered Human Rights Maybe? Horny Badger, not Honey Badger, Horny Badger, okay. Hoopered Up, Hypercube MTG, I am Kaz. I am saying this only because our global economic system does not intrinsically support artistic expression. I assume Chandra's rug matches her drapes, but I'd still tap that like the target land of her revolution. I got a patron for you, Spice. Why does that read like a threat? I no longer want Emrakul to dominate me. This whole moon thing just isn't working out for me anymore. Imbecilicus Rex. In response, I bolt myself. In response, table flip. In response, I mental misstep your bolt, paying to life. Jack Bland, Jackson Seamayer, Jackson West, Jake, horror show game contestant, Jason LaRue, JC Jennifer Klein, Joel F, John Sheridan, Johnny Rifle, Jonah Shish, Josh, Joshua M. Stephan, Julie Bunn, Julius Home, Justin Dempsey, Kalia Whithart, Kansas DeJesus, Kate B, Kay Sandham, Keno Dies, Kester, Khans of Tarkir is anti-Sultai revisionist propaganda, Ku Zombie, Kurd Ape Apologizer, Carl Denley, Leone, Lover of Dragons, Lewis, Lily of the North Star, literally a ghost that pushes over candles, Lonis, Crypto-Marxologist, Lord Carnox, Luigi in a paper-mache fedora, Lysius, Linnea, Madame Monroe, Magic Arcanum, Magic Fellow, Mario Romero, Mars Faye, Mente, the Mage, Meow Sarita, Metal Gamer 21, Micha, Milo Wilson, Moose, Morbid Panda, Maury Robbins, Miles Melson, Nathan Brinson, Nathan Speepisman Harris, Nemo Dakar, No Bluffs, Nom 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 Nom, Yoshi! Nox, a trans otter, a little less tired but as angry as ever, Obi-Wan Sherlock Closo, I don't know if was that his real name? O Worm, Omar Altebayi, one of the many people who cried 4 hours, 8 minutes and 38 seconds into the Tarkia video. Yeah. One Single Mongus, pronounced like Mungus, like in humongous. Feel free to read this part out as well. Paper Crane, the Cuddle Demon. Pappy Markov was a mistake. Penguin Flight School LLC. Peter Carter. Phoenix Swans. Potion Cellar Door. Quality Bear Hugs. Quentin Coldwater. Kwasu. Raghavar Cavalli. Read this in the voice of Werner Herzog. Rishi Sunak's Adidas Sambas, choice sneakers for fascists worldwide. Robin, Robson Yukon, Ross Conklin, Samuel Kona, Scrimblow Bimblow, the lovable Scrunko, several goblins in a trench coat, Sean, Shyboy Everest, Skolaton, Sky Johnson, Sorry Zia, Stupid Pigeon, Swan Hunter, Tamio's defunct New Phyrexian Orphanage, Thanks Wanderer, Thar's Refined Grizzly, the A-positive blood-type goddess of death, the entire B-movie script, the ghost of Karl Marx in 4D, the Jellybean Warlock, the Paultism, the Moric, the one who plays Thomas Quinlan, Thomas Saint, To Erin is Human, Totally a Spy, aka He Who Sits for Emrakul, hashtag She Has Been Returned to Us, hashtag I Told You She'd Return, you're not wrong, your lore has been consistent, Totally a Spy, Travis K, Twilord, Undead Herbs, Velen Balerin, War Crimes, Uwu, Well You Asked for It, Wesley that rat bastard communist, When I Close My Eyes, Niall Sylvain is there, watching, waiting, smiling, Whirlwind Abyss, Whiskey Jack, Wilder New Year is desperately trying to figure out this whole T20 cricket thing, good luck on that, William Lyndon Smith, Willow Willow Willow, Willow Willow, Wolf and Stoat, a gay Americana love story, Worston Show, Xenon, Yoink Kith Mookie, oh, that's a great name, Yuki Akama, Z13 Mia, Zach G, Xanoron, and Zoid Istic. Thank you everybody for continuing to support me in my endeavours to create Magic the Gathering and other, I guess, ancillary creative products. May God be with you, stay on the streets, and as always, stay spicy.